The perfect marriage. The perfect betrayal. The perfect revenge.
My name is Madison, and I've got red hair, curves I've always owned, and I'm 30 years old. I should probably start with that because what I'm about to tell you is going to make you question whether you really know the people in your life. And the reason I'm telling you this, the real reason, is because I was exactly like you once. I believed in love the way children believe in Santa Claus. Completely, blindly, without a single doubt. It was November in Toronto when everything fell apart. The kind of November where you can feel winter creeping in, where the trees have lost all their leaves and the city looks somehow naked and vulnerable. That's the perfect metaphor for how I felt walking into my CEO's office, by the way. Naked and vulnerable, about to be completely exposed. Madison, my CEO said. His name was Robert Chin. And he had this way of looking at you like he could see through all your bullshit. Sit down. We need to talk about your husband. That's the moment I should have known. That's the second when the universe was sending me a signal that everything I built, everything I thought I knew, was built on quicksand. I remember the snow falling outside his office window. I remember how the city looked beautiful and cold and indifferent to what was about to happen inside this room. I remember thinking that maybe if I didn't sit down, if I just turned around and walked out, none of this would be real. But I sat down anyway, because I'm not the kind of person who runs from bad news. I'm the kind of person who walks straight into it. I don't know where to start, Robert said. And this was the first time I saw hesitation in his eyes. My CEO, the man who had promoted me 3 times, who had mentored me, who had always seemed completely certain about everything, was hesitating. There's been some financial irregularities. Some very serious financial irregularities. And your husband's name keeps coming up. My heart started doing that thing where it beats too fast and you can feel it in your throat. What kind of irregularities? I asked, and my voice sounded like it was coming from somebody else, someone braver than me. He opened a file on his desk. Papers everywhere. Spreadsheets, hotel receipts, credit card statements, all the mundane evidence of an extraordinary betrayal. Travel expenses, he said. Your husband has been reimbursing himself for hotel stays that don't correspond to any company travel. And the dates, Madison, the dates line up with something else we discovered. I wanted to ask what something else meant, but I was afraid of the answer. I was afraid that if he said one more word, something inside me that was barely holding together would break completely. We have an employee in accounting named Jessica Park. She works in our Toronto office. She's been helping your husband falsify records. Not just a little, Madison. This has been going on for years. And I need to tell you something else, and I'm only telling you this because I think you have a right to know what your husband's been doing. There it was. The moment before everything changed. The pause before the meteor hits. I could feel it coming, like that moment right before a car crash where you realize something terrible is about to happen, but you can't stop it. Your husband isn't just seeing Jessica Park romantically. They've been living a double life. And I think you need to know that this isn't new. This goes back at least 4 years, maybe longer. 4 years. I did the math in my head. 4 years meant our wedding anniversary 3 years ago, when Min Jun had cried telling me how much he loved me. 4 years meant all the nights he said he was working late. All the conferences he attended, all the business trips to Vancouver and Montreal and Calgary, all of it was lies. Beautiful, elaborate, devastating lies.
How did you find out? I asked, because I needed to understand how my entire world could be held together with thread thin enough that a CEO could stumble across it. Your husband made a mistake, Robert said. A small one, but enough. He reimbursed himself for a hotel in Montreal last month, the Ritz-Carlton. Very expensive, very memorable. The receipt came through, and normally we wouldn't question it, but our auditor flagged it because the dates didn't match any company event. I started looking deeper. Then I found other discrepancies, other hotels, other dates. And then I started looking at Jessica's work patterns, and her vacation days always matched up with your husband's travel dates. I felt like I was going to throw up, like the floor was tilting underneath me, like gravity had suddenly stopped working and I was about to float away into nothing. There's more, Robert said, and I wanted to tell him to stop, that I couldn't handle more, that the amount of betrayal I'd already learned about was enough to last me several lifetimes. But I didn't say anything. I just sat there, numb, waiting for the rest of the destruction. We found wire transfers, he continued. Small amounts, but consistent. Your husband has been sending money to Jessica. Thousands of dollars over the years. We're talking about at least 50,000 in transfers that we've documented so far. He's been doing it through various accounts using different methods, but the pattern is there. And Madison, the money he's been sending isn't coming from his salary. It's coming from company accounts. He's been stealing. That's when I knew for certain. That's when the last little part of me that was hoping this was all some horrible misunderstanding realized it wasn't. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was premeditated, calculated, systematic betrayal. What are you going to do? I asked because I needed to know what happened next. I needed some kind of structure, some kind of plan, anything to hold on to. That's complicated, Robert said. Legally, I should report this to the authorities. The theft alone is enough, but I wanted to talk to you first. I wanted to give you a chance to know what was happening before we involved the police. I thought you deserved that. I remember nodding, but I don't remember really hearing what he said. I was somewhere else, somewhere in a different timeline where my husband loved me, where my best friend was actually my friend, where the last 6 years weren't just an elaborate lie wrapped up in pretty packaging. I need to tell you something else, Robert said, and I wondered what else there could possibly be. How many layers of deception could one man construct? How many secrets could one person keep? He said, Jessica isn't just stealing money. We've been monitoring her email, and there are messages between her and your husband. Very intimate messages. Madison, I think they're planning something. Something bigger than just the theft. Like what? I asked, but I already knew. I already understood what was happening. I just couldn't say it out loud yet. Like leaving, Robert said. Like disappearing. We found an email draft where Jessica mentioned a property in Vancouver, a house they were going to buy. Together. They were planning to run away together, and I think they were planning to do it soon. Very soon. That's when I stood up. That's when I walked out of Robert's office and down the hallway to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall and finally let myself cry. I cried like I had never cried before. I cried for the woman I had been that morning. The woman who thought she had a marriage, who thought she had a best friend, who thought she understood her own life. I cried for all the lies, all the moments that were stolen from me, all the versions of the truth I had been fed like poison wrapped up in chocolate. I don't know how long I was in that bathroom. Time had stopped working for me. But eventually I washed my face and walked back out, and the world looked exactly the same, but felt completely different. I went home early that day. Min-Jun wasn't home, of course. He was probably with Jessica, probably planning their future together in that Vancouver house. I walked through our apartment, and I started seeing everything differently. The furniture we'd picked out together, the photos on the walls, the kitchen where I'd made him breakfast this morning before he left for work. All of it suddenly felt like a stage set. like we were actors in a play and nobody had bothered to tell me the script had changed. I found his laptop in the bedroom. I know I shouldn't have opened it. I know that violates privacy and probably breaks some law. But I didn't care anymore. The rules didn't seem to apply to a world where your husband is stealing and lying and planning to run away with your best friend. His email was still open. I didn't have to do much digging. It was right there. Emails from Jessica. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. All the things I wasn't seeing. All the conversations happening behind my back. All the planning. Baby, I can't wait until we're finally together, just us. No more sneaking around, no more pretending. The word baby made me feel like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. I kept reading, even though every word was like a knife wound. There was another email from 6 months ago where Min Jun had written, "She's starting to suspect something. I think we need to move faster. I've already told you about the house in Vancouver. I know a realtor there who can help us get something under fake names. Once we have the money transferred, we can leave within a week." A week? He had been planning to leave me within a week? And that email was from 6 months ago, which meant he'd been planning this for even longer than that, which meant he'd been planning to leave me since before our last anniversary, since before he looked me in the eyes and told me he loved me more than anything in the world. I sat on our bed, in our bedroom, in the apartment we'd picked out together, and I realized something fundamental. I realized that I had been living with a stranger. That the man I'd married, the man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted with my entire life didn't exist. He was a fiction, a character that Min Jun had created specifically to fool me. He'd built an entire personality around deceiving me. He'd studied what I wanted, what I needed, what made me feel loved, and he'd performed it like an actor in a play, knowing the whole time that it was all temporary, all performative, all lies wrapped up in expensive gifts and carefully crafted words. But here's the thing about discovering betrayal. Here's the thing nobody tells you. The initial shock wears off, and then something else takes over, something darker, something that makes you realize you're not going to cry anymore. You're going to do something about this. You're going to take control back. You're going to make sure that the people who hurt you understand exactly what they've done and exactly what the consequences are going to be. I called my uncle. I called Uncle Mark because he'd always been the strong one in the family, the one who figured things out, the one who had moved from Michigan to Toronto and built a whole life for himself from nothing. I called him because I needed to hear from someone who loved me that this wasn't my fault, that I hadn't somehow caused this, that I wasn't stupid for not seeing it coming. "Come over," he said, immediately, without any preamble, without asking questions. "Don't say anything to Min Jun. Just come over. I'm making bibimbap." It was such a normal thing to say, such a devastatingly normal response to the complete annihilation of my life that it made me cry all over again. But I grabbed my coat and I left. I left the apartment without a note. I left the evidence on his laptop still pulled up on the screen. I left everything exactly as it was, like the scene of a crime. Because in a way it was. Emotional crimes. Betrayal crimes. The kind of crimes that destroy people from the inside out. Uncle Mark's apartment was warm and smelled like Korean food and safety. It was on the second floor of a converted Victorian house in a neighborhood where everybody had lived for 20 years and knew each other's grandchildren's names. It was the kind of place where bad things weren't supposed to happen, where life was supposed to be simple and good and predictable. He was in the kitchen when I arrived, and the moment he saw my face, he just pulled me into a hug. He didn't ask questions. He just held me while I fell apart all over again. He let me cry into his shoulder for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes. He let me shake and gasp and release all the pain that I'd been holding inside.
Eventually, I sat down at his kitchen table and I told him everything. Every email, every receipt, every betrayal, every lie. I told him about the house in Vancouver, about Jessica, about the 5 years of deception, about the money, about the plan to leave me within a week. I told him everything and he listened without interrupting, which somehow made it worse because it meant he was hearing the full weight of it, the complete scope of what had happened to me. When he was finished, he sat down across from me and he told me something that changed everything. "Madison," he said, his American accent coming through stronger when he was emotional. "I need to tell you something, and I'm only telling you because you need to know the truth. But I've been seeing things. For months, I've been seeing Min Jun around the city with a woman, a young Korean woman. I wasn't sure at first, but I've seen them together multiple times. I've seen them at restaurants. I've seen them at hotels. I've seen them walking together holding hands in Chinatown like they didn't care who saw them. And I didn't say anything because I wasn't absolutely sure, and I didn't want to cause problems if I was wrong, but I should have said something. I should have told you. I should have been brave enough to tell you the truth, even when it was difficult." That moment when my uncle admitted he'd seen Min Jin with Jessica was actually a relief. A weird relief, I know, but relief nonetheless, because at least then I knew I wasn't going crazy. At least then I knew that I hadn't imagined signs. At least then I knew that the intuition that had been nagging at me for months was actually legitimate and based in reality. "Do you know her name?" I asked. "No," Uncle Mark said, "but I could recognize her if I saw her again. She's tall, very pretty, dark hair usually pulled back in a ponytail. And Madison, the way he looks at her, it's not the way he looks at you. It's not even close, I can tell you that much. The way he looks at her is like she's the only person in the world. The way he looks at you is like you're furniture, like you're something he has to tolerate because of circumstance." That night, I sat at Uncle Mark's kitchen table with a cup of green tea that he'd made for me, steaming and fragrant with jasmine, and I started planning. Not in a chaotic way, not in a way driven by emotion or desperation, in a methodical way. In a way that reminded me that I wasn't actually as powerless as I felt. In a way that reminded me that I was Madison Chen, a woman who had built a successful career by being smart and strategic and willing to do what needed to be done. I decided that I wasn't going to confront Min Jun right away. I wasn't going to call Jessica. I wasn't going to do anything dramatic or emotional. Instead, I was going to do what he'd done. I was going to gather evidence. I was going to document everything. I was going to build a case so solid that when everything came out, there would be no denying what had happened. There would be no ambiguity. There would be no room for excuses or explanations or justifications. The next morning, I called Robert back at the office. "I want to know everything," I said, my voice steady and calm. "I want every piece of evidence. I want every email, every receipt, every wire transfer, every transaction, every single thing that shows what my husband's been doing. I want to know exactly what he's been doing and exactly how he's been doing it." "Madison," he said carefully, like he was talking to someone on the edge of breaking, "are you sure you want to do this? Sometimes ignorance is a kindness. Sometimes not knowing the details makes it easier to move on." "No," I said firmly, "no more kindness, no more protecting me from the truth, no more gentle handling. I want to know everything, every detail, every lie. I want to understand the complete scope of what's been happening right under my nose." And so began one of the strangest weeks of my life. I took time off work, telling Robert and the team that I had personal issues to handle, which was technically true in the most massive understatement of my entire existence. I spent my days in Uncle Mark's apartment going through documentation, financial records that Robert had been able to access, email chains that had been printed out,
Hotel reservations, credit card statements, the GPS tracking from Minjun's company car showing all the places he'd been, all the evidence of a life that had been lived in secret right alongside the life I thought we shared. Here's what I learned. Minjun had been seeing Jessica for almost 5 years, almost our entire marriage. Our wedding, 1 year into their affair, our anniversary last year when he'd told me he loved me, 4 years into the relationship he was having behind my back. And it wasn't just emotional. There were hotel receipts from fancy places, Four Seasons, Ritz-Carlton, the Park Hyatt, places I'd never been with him, places he'd never mentioned. There were credit card charges for restaurants I'd never heard of, for spa treatments, for lingerie, for jewelry, for all the things you buy for someone you're trying to impress, for someone you're trying to keep interested, for someone you're genuinely in love with.
And then there was the money. The $200,000 that Minjin had borrowed against his future, against our future, against every possibility of a life together that I'd been planning for. That money was disappearing. But where it was going was still a mystery. "Where's the money?" I asked Robert one afternoon, sitting in his office, surrounded by documents, like I was trying to solve a puzzle that nobody else could see. "That's what we haven't figured out yet," he admitted, shaking his head. "It's going through several different accounts in different banks through different transfers. Whoever set this up knew what they were doing. They knew how to hide money. They knew how to make it difficult to trace. It's going through shell accounts. It's being transferred internationally. It's disappearing like smoke." "That's $200,000, I said, the number still feeling incomprehensible to me. "That's our life. That's our future. That's money he could have used to build something with me, to buy a house with me, to create something lasting. And instead he spent it on lying to me, on deceiving me, on building a secret life with someone else." "I know," Robert said quietly. He'd been watching me throughout this whole process, watching how I was processing information, watching how I was transforming from a heartbroken woman into something else entirely, something colder, something more focused, something more dangerous. But I couldn't stop thinking about that money. It was bothering me. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch. It was like knowing there was a piece of the puzzle missing, and until I found it, nothing would make sense. Why would Minjin take out that much money just to run away with Jessica? They didn't need $200,000 to disappear. You could disappear on a lot less. You could get new identities for maybe $50,000 if you knew the right people. You could set up a new life in Vancouver on another $50,000. That still left $100,000 unaccounted for. What was it for? Unless it wasn't about running away at all. Unless it was about something else entirely. I did something I didn't think I'd do. Something that felt risky and desperate and completely unlike my normal, careful, calculated self. I called Jessica. I called my former best friend, the woman who had stabbed me in the back more thoroughly than I would have thought possible, and I asked to meet her for coffee. I lied and told her that I missed her, that I wanted to catch up, that I'd been so busy with work and I felt like we drifted apart. I could hear the relief in her voice when she said yes. Relief that I hadn't figured it out, relief that her secret was still safe, relief that she was going to get away with it. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Toronto, a place called Belzac's that was known for having really good espresso and really good pastries. It was a place where we met dozens of times before, back when I thought we were actually friends, back when I thought I could trust her with anything, back when I had no idea she was systematically destroying my life one secret at a time. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small table by the window looking out at the Toronto skyline. She was wearing a white blouse and dark jeans, and she looked happy. She looked happy in a way I hadn't seen her look in years. She looked like someone who was in love. She looked like someone who was getting exactly what she wanted. She looked like someone who thought she had gotten away with everything. I sat down across from her and I ordered a coffee that I had no intention of drinking. And I smiled, the smile that I'd been practicing in the mirror for days, the smile of Madison, the executive, the smile of Madison who suspected nothing, the smile of Madison, the betrayed wife who didn't yet know what was happening. "Jessica," I said after we'd exchanged pleasantries about the weather and her job and my job and all the normal things people talk about when they're pretending that everything is fine, "I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me." She looked at me and I saw something in her eyes. Not guilt, not shame, but fear. She was afraid of something, afraid that I was going to ask the question that would blow everything up, afraid that I was going to demand the truth.
"Are you in love with Min Jun?" I asked her directly, and I watched her face carefully. I watched every micro-expression. I watched the way her eyes darted away and then came back. I watched the way her hands tightened on her coffee cup. She didn't answer right away. She took a sip of her coffee, and she looked out the window at the Toronto skyline, and then she looked back at me. And for a moment, I thought she was going to lie. I thought she was going to deny it. I thought she was going to tell me that I was being paranoid and that she would never betray me like that. But she didn't. "Yes," she said quietly. "I am. I have been. For a long time." At least she didn't lie about that. At least she had that much dignity. But it didn't make anything better. If anything, it made things worse, because it meant this wasn't a moment of weakness. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't something that had spiraled out of control. This was intentional. This was chosen. This was deliberate and calculated and completely conscious. "How long?" I asked. "Since the beginning," she said. "Madison, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but I fell in love with him before I met you. He was trying to get me out of his mind by dating you, and it didn't work. It never worked. He was always mine, and you were just the distraction, the cover story, the safe thing while he figured out how to be with me." That's when I felt it. That's when I felt something snap inside me, because she didn't just hurt me. She didn't just betray me. She destroyed me. And now she was sitting in front of me, drinking coffee, telling me that my entire marriage, everything I thought we had, was just a distraction, that I was just a cover story, that I was something my husband had chosen for convenience while he waited for his real love to be available. I didn't make a scene. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my coffee in her face, even though I wanted to. I wanted to do it so badly that my hands were shaking. Instead, I smiled. And I said, "I know everything, Jessica. Every email, every hotel, every penny, every moment. And I'm going to destroy both of you." Then I got up and I walked away. I walked out of that coffee shop and I didn't look back. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that I had just made a very dangerous enemy. What I didn't know is that the story I thought I was understanding was only the first act of something much, much larger. What I didn't know was that the betrayal went much, much deeper than I could possibly imagine. And the answers I was looking for were going to lead me somewhere I never expected to go. Because there's something nobody tells you about people who can lie that well, who can construct an entire false reality that seamlessly, who can live two lives at the same time without seeming to suffer any internal conflict whatsoever. They're not normal people. They're not people who made a mistake and feel bad about it. They're people who are fundamentally different from you and me. They're people capable of manipulating others in ways that seem almost psychologically impossible. They're people capable of looking you in the eyes and promising you forever while simultaneously planning to destroy everything you've built together. They're people capable of anything. And sometimes when you start pulling the thread of one lie, you find out that the entire garment is unraveling. I went back to work the next week. I walked in on Monday morning and I pretended nothing had happened. I pretended that my marriage hadn't imploded.
I pretended that my best friend hadn't betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. I put on my professional clothes and my professional smile and my professional demeanor, and I acted like Madison the executive instead of Madison the heartbroken woman whose entire life was falling apart. But I was also gathering information. I was documenting everything. I was creating files. I was building a case that would be so comprehensive, so detailed, so absolutely undeniable that nobody would be able to explain it away or justify it or minimize it. On Wednesday, my CEO called me into his office again. "I wanted to give you a heads up," he said, his voice careful and measured. "I'm going to report the theft to the authorities. I've held off as long as I can, but legally I'm liable if I don't report it. My lawyers have been pushing me on this. I wanted you to know before I did. I wanted to give you a chance to prepare yourself for what's about to happen." "Okay," I said. "What happens now?" "The police will probably want to talk to your husband," Robert said. "There will probably be an investigation. There will probably be charges. And Madison, I'm sorry, but you might be named in the case as the spouse of the accused. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be public. It's going to bring a lot of unwanted attention to your personal life." I nodded. I'd already known that this was coming. I'd already prepared myself for the fact that my marriage implosion was going to become very public very quickly. I'd already started thinking about how to spin this in my favor, how to frame myself as the victim, how to make sure that when the media found out about all of this, they would be sympathetic to me instead of judgmental. "Okay," I said. "Thank you for the warning. I'm prepared for that." What I didn't know, what I absolutely could not have anticipated, was that the police investigation was going to uncover something else, something that would change everything about how I understood my husband and Jessica and what had really been happening, something that would make me question whether I'd understood the situation at all, something that would force me to reevaluate every assumption I'd made about who these people were and what they were capable of. The police came and arrested Minjun at his office on Friday. They came in the morning, right when the office was filling with people, right when there were the maximum number of witnesses, right when the maximum number of people would see him being arrested. I found out because it was on the news. My husband, arrested at his place of work in front of his colleagues for embezzlement and wire fraud. The man I'd married, the man I trusted with everything, was a criminal, a thief, a liar. Jessica was arrested the same day on her lunch break at the coffee shop where she worked. She was taken away in handcuffs in front of her coworkers and her customers and all the people who thought they knew her. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt satisfied that justice was being served, but all I felt was empty. All I felt was the knowledge that the next phase of my life was going to be incredibly messy and complicated and public. All I felt was the dawning realization that I didn't actually understand what was happening, that there were still pieces of this puzzle that didn't fit, that there was still something I was missing. The media picked it up immediately. The story was too juicy to ignore. Toronto executive arrested in embezzlement scheme. Love affair leads to arrest. Employee and executive's wife implicated in theft. My personal catastrophe became public entertainment. My pain became content. My suffering became a story for people to discuss over dinner. My phone rang constantly. Friends wanting to know if I was okay, family wanting to offer support, reporters wanting to know how I was feeling,
colleagues wanting to express sympathy. I didn't answer most of the calls. I just let them go to voicemail. I just let the messages pile up. I didn't have the energy to pretend to be okay. I didn't have the strength to be brave for other people.
But there was one call I did answer. It was from a detective named Sarah Williams. "Ms. Madison," she said, her voice professional but not unkind. "I'd like to meet with you to discuss your husband's case. There are some things that don't quite add up, and I think you might be able to help us understand what's really going on." "Of course," I said. "When?" "How about tomorrow, 10 a.m. at the Toronto Police Service headquarters?" "I'll be there," I said. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Detective Williams had meant. What didn't add up? I thought I understood everything. The affair, the theft, the betrayal, the plan to run away. What else could there possibly be? What could I possibly not understand about my own life? The next morning, I put on my most professional outfit. I needed to feel strong. I needed to feel like Madison the executive, not Madison the betrayed wife. I needed armor. I needed protection. I needed to feel like I had some control over the situation. Detective Williams was waiting for me in an interrogation room. Not as dramatic as it sounds, but still an interrogation room. Like I was a suspect. Like I was the one being investigated instead of being the victim. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing for me to sit across from her. "I know this is difficult." "Just tell me what you need," I said. "Your husband is claiming that he didn't know about the embezzlement," Detective Williams said, watching my face carefully. "He's saying that Jessica set up all the false accounts without his knowledge. He's saying that she manipulated him into an affair and stole from the company without his consent. He's saying that he's the victim here, that she took advantage of him, that he didn't know what was happening." "That's a lie," I said immediately. "I've seen the emails. I've seen the evidence. He was actively participating." "I know," Detective Williams said. "That's why I wanted to talk to you, because your husband's version of events doesn't match the financial records. But what's interesting is that Jessica's version doesn't match either." "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I was afraid of the answer. "Jessica is claiming that the money wasn't for them. She's claiming that someone else was orchestrating everything, that Minjun and she were just the public face of it, that someone else was really in control." That's when my stomach dropped. Because Jessica was a lot of things, but she wasn't a good liar. She wasn't the kind of person who could construct an elaborate story to deflect blame. She was too simple for that. She was too straightforward. If she was claiming that someone else was involved, then someone else probably was involved. Who? Who else was involved? That's what we're trying to figure out, and we think you might be able to help us with that. Because according to the financial records, someone was using your account information. Someone was making charges in your name. Someone was impersonating you. I felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. My account? I didn't authorize any charges. I didn't even know someone could do that without my permission. I didn't know it was possible to commit fraud like that on such a large scale without me finding out almost immediately. My account? I didn't authorize any charges. And my voice sounded weak and confused even to my own ears. "I know, which is why we think you might be a victim here as well. Ms. Madison, is there anyone else in your life who might have had access to your personal information? Anyone who might have known your passwords? Anyone who might have wanted to hurt you?" And that's when something clicked into place. That's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. That's when I understood what had really been happening all along. "My brother," I whispered. "My brother David had access to all my financial information. He helped me set up my accounts when I moved to Canada. He knew all my passwords." "What's your brother's name?" Detective Williams asked, and she was writing things down now, focused intently. "David," I said. "David Chen. But he's in Michigan. He's not involved in any of this." "Actually," Detective Williams said slowly,
we might have a problem because according to the records we found, there's been activity in your accounts from a Toronto-based IP address. Your brother might have moved." I felt the room tilt. I felt the ground shift underneath me because I hadn't talked to my brother in 6 months. 6 months. And in that 6 months, he could have moved to Toronto. He could have been orchestrating everything. He could have been the real mastermind all along. "I don't understand," I said. "Why would my brother do this? Why would he want to hurt me?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," Detective Williams said. "But I need you to think. Is there anything in your past with your brother? Any conflict? Any reason he might have wanted to hurt you?" I thought back. I thought back to my childhood, to growing up in Michigan with David. And then I remembered something I'd almost forgotten, something from when we were teenagers. There was a girl, his girlfriend, Rachel. He was crazy about her, and then I introduced her to a boy he didn't like. She ended up dating that guy instead of David. It was a huge deal at the time. He was devastated. But that was 15 years ago. He got over it. "Did he?" Detective Williams asked quietly. "Are you sure about that?" And that's when I realized. That's when I understood. That's when I put all the pieces together and everything became horrifyingly clear. My brother hadn't gotten over it. My brother had spent 15 years waiting for revenge. My brother had somehow found out that Min-Jun was Korean like the boy Rachel had chosen. Not the same guy, but the same culture, the same background. Someone who represented everything that David thought had been taken from him. And my brother had orchestrated this entire thing. He'd set up false accounts using my name. He'd worked with Jessica somehow, found a way to convince her to help him. He'd made sure that my marriage would collapse in the most public way possible. He'd spent 15 years planning revenge, and I was the tool he used to get it. I walked out of the police station and made a decision. I was done being a victim. I was going to find my brother. I was going to understand what he'd done. And I was going to make sure he understood what his actions had cost me. But when I got to his apartment in downtown Toronto, the door was already open. The place was empty. He was gone. On the table was a note. One sentence. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, but some people deserve what's coming to them." I never found David. But 6 months later, I got a call from Detective Williams. David had been arrested in Vancouver. He tried to access someone else's accounts, a woman named Rachel. My brother had never actually gotten over Rachel. He'd never actually gotten over anything. As for Min-Jun and Jessica, they both pleaded guilty. Min-Jun got 2 years, Jessica got 18 months. They were released from jail 6 months apart. They never saw each other again. I sold the apartment. I changed my phone number. I started therapy. I learned that sometimes the people who hurt you most aren't the obvious villains. Sometimes they're the people in your own family. Sometimes they're the ghosts of their own past, haunting everyone around them. Uncle Mark made me bibimbap every Sunday for a year. He didn't ask questions. He just made sure that I knew that someone loved me, that someone was there for me, that someone had my back. And I learned something that nobody tells you about betrayal, that it doesn't destroy you. It transforms you. It makes you understand that the life you thought you had was never real, but the person you become after betrayal, that's real. That's authentic. That's someone who can't be fooled twice. I'm 30 years old now. I have red hair and I'm comfortable in my own skin. I have a successful career. I have an uncle who makes me bibimbap. I have friends who know the real me. I have a life that I built myself, brick by brick, choice by choice. And if I ever see Min-Jun or Jessica or David again, I won't feel angry. I won't feel sad. I'll feel grateful. Grateful that they showed me what I was capable of surviving. Grateful that they taught me that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well. Sometimes it's just being happy. Sometimes it's just refusing to let what other people did to you